Welcome to Ignite Your Confidence for women in leadership who want to speak up and stand out. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Here you'll get all of the tips and tools that you need to stand out with unshakable confidence. Let's jump into today's episode. 3 ways to leave a legacy. That's going to be our focus for this because today I went to a memorial service. And there is nothing more perspective shifting than going to a service where someone has passed away. It's amazing when you think about it. I was reading the 2-page card of my friend's life, going, isn't it amazing how you live this entire life? And then I walk away with this little brochure that encapsulates a person's life on one piece of paper. Now, I don't mean to be depressing about it, but it's really important to think about, where are you spending your time? And do you want to be spending your time on the things that you are spending your time on? It's incredible when you start recognizing, where am I? What am I doing basically with the energy, with the attention, with my mindset, with the actual time that I'm spending? And obviously there is time, 168 hours in a week, that never changes. So there really isn't such a thing as time management. It's about attention management. What are you giving your attention to? And this is the invitation that I want all of us to think about as we're listening. And as I'm speaking today, I want to leave you with 3 ways to leave a legacy, specifically 3 things to think about, very tangible action steps that can help all of us get clearer on, wow, how am I coming across? How do I want to come across? And do I need to change some things? And also maybe I want to celebrate the things that I am doing well. So one of the women that came up to me, one of my friends at the memorial service, came up to me and said, I am working 3/4 of my life. I am close enough to retirement that I feel like I need to just hold out. And yet I am not happy. What am I doing all of this for? What am I doing all of this for? And she used an example that I think is very prevalent among all of us, especially those high achievers that are listening to this. She was going to take some time off, and actually she was going to a remote area where she might not have had Wi-Fi. And she said what was really unusual for her is that she didn't even bring her computer. And it was her boss, who's a C-suite executive, that said, well, at least we could get a hold of you if you needed to hop on a Teams meeting or something. And she's thinking in her mind, I don't think so. But isn't this amazing how we live in this society where everybody feels like you have to work all the time, primarily in the US. Let's be honest, it's primarily in the US. And I'm coming off of this memorial service today, trying to figure out, what am I doing with my life? What do I want to shift? And that's my invitation to you. So let's get started here. I feel like I'm basically I've got this, I don't know if it's snark or extra energy tonight around, what are we doing with our lives? What does this all mean? And the first thing I want to remind each of us is that every moment that we have, before we even go into the 3 things, you can start now. You can start today. Even as you're listening to this, you can start thinking about these things and take action on these. The first one is to remember that you create an experience every time you have a touch point with someone, whether it's an email, whether it's in person or on the phone, whatever it might be. You are creating an experience for people. The question is it a good one or not? Do people feel drawn toward you, drawn away from you, or is it just sort of a neutral experience? So here's what I want to recommend you do. First of all, write down, and you can pause this right now, take 30 seconds to write down how you want people to feel around you when they are in your presence. Another way to think about this is, what do you want them to say about you when they leave your presence? Or how do you want them to talk about you behind your back? Let's put it that way, very candidly. What do you want them to say about you? How do you want them to feel around you? Ultimately, What experience do you want them to have? So when they think about you, they go, oh, this is the feeling I have. And we have to recognize that we are emotional beings. So people are having feelings around us, whether we like to believe it or not. It is true. That is the thing I would say. And then the second part to that, and this is the courageous part, ask people around you if it aligns with the truth of what you want, or I should say, does their truth align with your intention? There's something called intention versus impact, and we've all experienced this where you go, I never meant to come across that way, or how could you think that? That's not what I meant. But the impact is what we have to remember. We are making an impact. What intention are we setting? And is the impact landing the way that we intended it to land? I would suggest that you take this time to ask 3 to 5 people. Hey, I want to check in with you because, and you can blame it on me. You can say, I'm listening to this podcast from Karen Laus, and we're talking about leaving a legacy and ways that you can do that. And I want to make sure that I'm leaving the legacy that I want to leave, even while I'm alive. How are you experiencing me? Here are the 3 things that I'm hoping that you want to feel in my presence. So maybe it's, I want you to feel heard. I want you to feel joy, and I want you to feel respected. Ask them straight up. Do you feel those most of the time when you're in my presence? And I say this is the courageous part because, first of all, not everybody is into personal growth. You listening to this, you're in probably the 10 percentile of people in the world that care about how they come across and the impact that they want to make. So when you ask other people in your life, when you ask other people in your life, it might be an unusual question for them. But this is why you pick safe people. Ultimately, for sure, not toxic people. Hopefully you don't have any toxic people in your life anyway. That's a whole other podcast. But ask the people that you know and trust and see what they have to say. That is the best way to find out, am I coming across the way I want to? So that is number 1. Number 2 is to write your eulogy. If you have not done this, I would highly recommend it. It might feel really sobering and strange, but wouldn't you, first of all, well, there's 2 reasons to do this. There's probably more than 2, but the 2 that come to mind are 1, it gives you clarity of beginning with the end in mind. How do you want people to talk about you when you truly are passed away? What do you want them to say? What do you want to be known for? What do you want to highlight? Because here's the other reason. Wouldn't you rather dictate what people are saying about you specifically in a more formal eulogy? But the reason that I recommend you do this exercise is not for a formal eulogy. The true point here is for you to self-reflect and think, if I truly were to pass away, what would I want people to be reading about me on that 2-pager that they leave with in the pamphlet? Or what would you want the person that is actually giving the eulogy up front, what would you want them to be hearing about you? And this reminds me in general about when we give presentations. Oftentimes we feel like, oh, I'm like, you're going to focus. Well, let's put it this way. Whatever you focus on, that's what your audience is going to focus on. If you are good at facilitating, at helping them see the point, making sure it's clear, the audience is going to go where you tell them to go, connecting the dots for your audience. It's the same with the eulogy, that you direct people's attention to where you want it to go. And I hate to make this too terribly much about business, but it is true that this is classic marketing. What is your positioning in the market, and how are people responding to that? So make sure that the eulogy that you write makes you think. Well, I shouldn't say make sure. I mean, it's going to make you think. Make sure it's what you're living a life that is worthy of the eulogy that you want to be read at your funeral. Number 3, get in touch with your why. Simon Sinek said this in such a beautiful way in his book, Start With Why. I have another mentor, wonderful coach named Harris III. And he talks about finding your wow, getting in touch with wonder. What is going to be awe-striking to you that you can bring into your life? And then find your why from there. Either way, figure out what matters to you. What is the purpose of your life? Now, that is a huge question. So here's a way to break it down and think about it. I have an exercise that my very first coach, Joel Garfinkel, gave me, and I love this exercise because it's so helpful. You can see different parts of your life. And this is also a great exercise when you are trying to figure out your next career move, or you're not really sure what you want to do, but you want to do something different. Look at your life at the different decades and think, what did I enjoy doing? Don't even put it in the context of work. Think about before you were 10 years old. What did you enjoy doing when you were into kindergarten or around that 6-year-old age range? What did you enjoy? What did people say about you? I remember when I was a little girl in first grade, I used to come home from school every day. And my mom was always prepared for this. I would say to her, either can so-and-so come over to my house, or, so-and-so come over and play, or can I go over to somebody else's house? I was such an extrovert. I've always been incredibly social. And that is a memory that I have vaguely. My mom would tell me more than anything else. She's every day you would come home and say that. And then look at the next decade, maybe even think about it as stages in your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be decades. Think about, what did you enjoy doing in grade school, in high school, in college, in your 20s, in your 30s, etc. When you can get in touch with the things that you're most passionate about, specifically that give you joy, things that you like to do, places you like to be, that can help us get in touch with our why. And I remember years ago, I don't talk a lot about my faith, but I can specifically remember when I was on a business trip. I was in a hotel. It was probably back in, I don't know, the early 2000s. And I was thinking, so many Christians talk about having a life verse. I've never had a life verse. And I thought, I want a life verse. So I prayed and I said, God, will you give me a life verse? I really want a life verse. And I just basically flipped the Bible open, stuck my finger in there, and opened it up to Hebrews 10:24. And this is my life verse. It's amazing how incredibly perfect for me this is. And that is, encourage one another to outbursts of love and good deeds. Frankly, that could not describe me better. I love encouraging people, and I love the bursts. I love that word in general, but encouraging others, notice how it's not just encouraging others, but to outbursts of love and good deeds. In other words, inspiring other people to take action, feeling encouraged enough that then they would want to go out and do something, whether that's encourage someone else or do something for their life, make the world a better place by making their lives better. Who knows? But that stuck with me. And I thought, that's it. It's not just a Bible verse. The Bible verse represents the fact that I love to encourage people. And if that's all I do on this earth, I will have considered my life of value add to people. And I know that my life, just like your life, is more than simply a value add to someone else. But if we think about if we go back to where I started with the experience that we create in the world, that every single one of us creates one, why not have it be a positive one? And I feel like I need to take a pause here and talk about the power of grieving, because if we think about positivity, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a household where you were taught to put your chin up no matter what happened, even if it was horrible, and you looked for the positive. Now, there's nothing wrong with looking for the positive. I think that's important, but we did miss a step, a lot of us in our upbringing, about the power of acknowledging negative reality. Leaders are really bad at this, a lot of us. We want to put things under the rug, or we don't want to talk about things. And this could not be a worse thing to do. We have to talk about these things. We have to acknowledge And a way that you can do this is to journal about it or write down bullet points. I don't care if you don't like journaling, just try writing down bullet points. I understand it can feel like, oh, journaling, that's going to take forever. Start with a 5-minute timer and write the losses that you are experiencing or have experienced, because that will open up the pathway to joy. If we stuff down these negative realities and we don't acknowledge them, we don't hold space for them, and all we do is put on a smiley face, they are going to come out somewhere. They're going to come out somewhere. And that is critical to remember. Definitely take the time to grieve. And it is so important to grieve with someone. So let's say you start with a loss inventory, and all that is making a list or an inventory of your losses. Start there, write them down, and then find a safe person that you feel really comfortable with and that you trust, and read that list to them. Allow them to be a witness, and make sure that you tell them in advance, I want to read my loss inventory to you. This probably isn't something that's going to be exciting and positive. And so I want you to listen only. Please just listen and be a witness to the losses that I've experienced. That holding the space, being in the well with someone, is one of the greatest gifts that you could ever give someone. Allowing them to feel their feelings, even if they're painful. Too often we want to save people, or we tend to fragilize people, and that is not healthy. Allow them to feel their feelings, just like you're asking them to be a witness to yours, and then that can create space for joy. Another thing you can do related to grieving is, after you write down this loss inventory, or you put one on each piece of paper, then burn it. Burn it outside, somewhere in a safe place for sure. But there is something about the physical act of burning that is cathartic. I don't know how to explain it exactly other than that. So consider that. And this is all getting to where we were talking about point number 3 of 3 ways to leave a legacy, is to find your why, to find your purpose. And the more we can explore this, and keep in mind, let it be messy. Let it be nonlinear for those of you super linear people. I know this might be really hard for some of you, but think about all the different things that, gosh, what gives me joy? What is something that I like to do? What do other people experience in me? And that's another great exercise. This is one that I recommend a lot when I talk about how to tackle self-doubt. I call it 5 and 5. Find 5 people that you know and trust to give you 5 positive qualities about you. That can help us get a litmus test or a read on how people are experiencing us. It is a great, wonderful way to see these positive qualities that we generally take for granted about ourselves. But when you see it through someone else's eyes, it can be so revealing. And you go, oh my gosh, that is so cool. And that's something I can't say enough about, how wonderful it is to do that. And just because you've done it once doesn't mean you can't do it again. I've done it over the course of years, I think 3 times. And one thing I want to mention in there, this is something that I was always told. So when I was a kid, people used to tell me that they felt really comfortable around me, even in high school, and on and on and on. Throughout my life, people have said so many times, they've said, I can't believe I'm telling you this, or you have great energy. Those are the 2 things that I hear a lot. And at first, for years, all I thought was, oh, that's nice. That was nice. It made me feel good. But it wasn't until I started realizing, and particularly in the business world, recognizing that that is such a strength for business. Building relationships is key to you being warm. In other words, somebody will feel more trustworthy. You'll come across as more trustworthy. They're going to feel more entrusted around you if you come across in a way that is warm and caring. And it's part of it is how you come across. Another part of it is an actual skill. So in other words, some of it is just who you are. And so it's hard to go, well, then how would I change that? So one of those things is the simplicity of presence, being warm in your vocal tone, in your facial expressions, and remembering to smile. But it's also the tactical of asking questions. And then the hardest part, pausing long enough for people to listen, or for you to listen, pausing long enough for them to be able to answer the question that you've put out there. These are all different ways, but going back to the theme of 5 and 5 for me was recognizing, oh my gosh, now this is actually called psychological safety. And that is something that is directly tied to producing results in the business world. People buy things from who they know, like, and trust. And that is absolutely true in any type of business setting, no matter what it is. So those are my 3 tips for you, 3 ways to leave a legacy after having spent time at a memorial service today, which was sad, but also really great to see everybody. It also was a reminder, when you go to these services, whether it's a wedding or a funeral, sadly, you think, oh my gosh, there's so many amazing people that I don't stay in touch with. And I know life gets busy, but this is another reminder of what is the life that you want to create? How do you want people to talk about you? So let's review these 3 ways to leave a legacy. 1 is the experience that you create for other people. What is it? How do you want people to feel around you? How do you want them to talk about you? The second one is to write your eulogy. So you can think about the end in mind. What is that? Are you living up to the eulogy that you want to write? And then 3 is determining your why or your purpose, and that will help guide you. I will also say, from my perspective, leaving my corporate job in 2020 to focus on my mission to eradicate self-doubt in 10 million women, and in the next 10 years, that is a huge and very lofty mission. I recognize that. I will tell you this, it is what keeps me going on the hard days. If I am focused on that mission and bringing it down home to each woman that I touch to say, hey, here's a communication tip. Here's something you could say when you're in the boardroom. Here's something that you could do so that your credibility goes higher in that next meeting. All of these tangible tips are directly tied to my mission, and that is what gives me focus. So it's that combination of my personal why or my purpose of encouraging others, but then also on a really more business perspective. And these are so interconnected. It's helping women have these communication tools to be able to speak up and ask for what you want. And as a reminder, on my website, if you have not gone to my website and you're not on my email list, you're missing out on the 9 words to avoid and what to say instead. You might be saying some of these things. They're so common. That's why I created a tip sheet for it. And that is free on my website. You can also learn more about the mission 10 and 10. And if you're looking for a speaker, you're looking for somebody to solve your communication problems at work, I would love to have a conversation with you. And on that note, make sure that you leave a legacy that you are wanting to leave. Oh, by the way, side note, this is an important side note. I'm going to be taking a break. It bums me out, but I feel like it is something I need to do. It's not just I feel like it. I need to do it for my own sanity. I love talking with you. I'm so grateful that you're getting value out of this. And what I'm going to do is take a break in November and December of 2023. But then I will be back in January of 2024, primarily with more solo episodes, because I heard you. Giving those and getting those communication tips are what you love most, my practical tips to immediately stand out with that unshakable confidence in the boardroom and beyond. So until next time, thanks so much for listening.
And that's a wrap of another episode of Ignite Your Confidence. I'm your host, Karen Laus. Thank you so much for listening. If you loved today's episode, please subscribe and leave a review. It helps other people find the podcast faster, and it certainly helps me. If you're interested in more tips and tools around confidence, please join me over in my Facebook group called Ignite Your Confidence with Karen Laus. Remember, you too can stand out with unshakable confidence.